Hey everyone, we're back. DF Direct Weekly now hits its 96th edition. And yes, we're recording this one in the wake of Microsoft's Xbox developer _ Direct. And joining me to discuss that and several other topics, first of all, Alex Battaglia.
Hey there, Rich. Yeah, we're here to talk about that Microsoft stuff, as well as two games John and I are reviewing at the moment.
Absolutely, which means that you've spoiled the introduction for John Linneman.
Gee, what a surprise. I'm here again.
You're here again.
Yes, we're filming on a different day, though.
Yeah,
we are indeed.
so different.
Let's move on to the first news topic. So dominating the discussion for this Direct is going to be the content of another Direct, Microsoft's Xbox Direct Developer Showcase. 5 titles covered, one of which we'd never seen before and which nobody really knew about. And I'd say that it's a remarkably good presentation, pretty much exactly what we've been calling for years, I think. But we're going to be talking about the games first of all, and I guess we should start with the game which we've been thinking a lot about from a technical perspective, Forza Motorsport. Looks spectacular. John, first impressions?
Yeah, so this is the first new Forza Motorsport game in 6 years, I think.
It's been a while.
So 2017 would have been Forza Motorsport 7. So obviously, this is kind of a big deal, right? Because the thing about Forza Motorsport was up until now, they were basically stuck in this development cycle of releasing a new game every 2 years or so, right? They got the Forza Motorsport 7 in 12 years. So that's a lot of Forza games. And, they've clearly decided, it's time to go back to the drawing board, re-architect the series. I think Forza Horizon stole a lot of thunder over the years, right? It's a different kind of game, but Horizon is the big draw now versus Motorsport. So I think they really wanted to try to make something fresh and new within the constraints of Motorsport, obviously. And that's what we're seeing here, because this is a full next generation looking or current generation looking game, clearly built from the ground up for the new platforms and the PC. And they're doing some remarkable stuff. So the level of detail on display is fantastic. They've got ray traced reflections in gameplay and RTGI in the, replays and other modes, I think. From what I can understand here. I know Alex is thinking, gee, I hope we can turn on RTGI in the gameplay though.
And PC. On PC.
Yeah. But this is definitely a significant step up from Forza Motorsport 7 and looks fresh. Whereas, I think GT7 looks very good, but it's pretty darn obvious that it was just derived from GT Sport, right? Whereas most of what they showed here looks completely new, aside from some of the car models, which are still older car models, but they do benefit from much improved paint shading. I'll be curious to compare this actually, but when they showed some of the cars up close, the material quality and the paint finally looks a lot better than it used to in every other Forza. So that's really nice to see. This was a really nice snippet, and it's shaping up to be one of the best looking games we've seen thus far this generation. And I'm very excited to do a sequel to my Gran Turismo Sport versus Forza Motorsport 7 video, because that was that was an epic. I had a lot of fun with that, and I think it's going to go a little differently this time, but we'll see.
Absolutely. Alex, thoughts?
I'm excited about this because it's going to be, based upon what they're describing here and how it is targeting series consoles only, I think it's going to be one of the first racing games specifically targeting these consoles, and also going to be targeting PC, which will have the ray tracing essentially be baked into the game's original design. Which is something we haven't usually seen. A lot of games that have released on the current gen consoles and on PC, the ray tracing is optional. I mean, maybe you'll be able to turn it off on PC. We'll see here. I would almost kind of wish they didn't, because it would mean they had spent all this time making sure that the objects in every part of the world is with the ray tracing in mind there. And I think that it's going to pay dividends for a lot of the stuff that we see in this game, especially trackside detail. One thing I did notice is that unlike Forza Horizon, what is it, 5 now? Yeah, 5. Unlike that new Forza game that did add ray tracing on PC, it was only for eventually it was only for the cars and only the self reflections of the car and things like that. It's not that game changing, but here I noticed when the cars were like flying by, like the glass buildings along the side of the raceway, that you could see actually the real time reflections in the building's windows itself too, and that's going to apply to every other object in the game, I imagine, as well too, which means the general shading of the environment is also affected as well. Which, once again, like I said earlier, pays dividends. It's a lot better than just what we saw in Forza Horizon before this, and presumably other games as well, because it's baked into the technology at this point in time.
I'll be curious to see what their roughness cutoff is on this, because theoretically, you know, all the materials in this environment should be able to reflect something, reflect the light, and if they do it right, it could really be a game changer.
It could.
They seemed to be referring though to mirror-like.
They
surfaces.
did.
Oh, that's true. They said mirror and glass, right? So transparency reflections as well.
Yeah, transparent. Those are big, though, obviously, with so much glass on cars these days.
Yeah.
I definitely like that, though. Though, like what John's saying, though, I didn't like the way they phrased it once again. There's two things I want to take out of this that are like more meta things. Is I think Microsoft, this presentation in general was really, really good. But I think on top of this, like the way Sony does it, they need to be more clear with the footage that they're playing as to what platform it is running on, and also what type of sequence it is. Sony does those things really, really well. It says like cutscene sequence, gameplay sequence, running on PlayStation 5, even running on PC. Sometimes they've done it before, I think. So like those are things that we need to see here, because when they were talking about like here in this video describing the next Forza Motorsport, they mentioned RTGI. And they show this 4K 60 FPS footage. I stepped the frames to make sure it was 60, and it's 60 FPS footage of like the side of the car where you could see the light bleeding onto it. And then I presume like 4K 60, that's really intense for RTGI with reflections on a console. And then they just a few sentences later mention ray tracing on track, but then they say it with like a comma with reflections. And if you're not paying attention, which I think a lot of people aren't, it does make it sound like RTGI is a part of the normal gameplay experience. I think that's like one thing where they just need to get the messaging down, so console players and PC players have really, firm expectations about what is they're seeing on screen here. Because I'd imagine if they're showing this game off right here, a lot of it was probably PC footage, just the way the things looked.
Yeah, and if they are showing 4K 60 with RTAO, then the concept that it wouldn't be an option in gameplay in PC becomes kind of unacceptable.
Yeah, it would be the GI.
I mean, if you've got the hardware to do it, then and you're showing footage doing it, then it should be in gameplay. And I'd imagine those replay cameras are actually a higher rendering load on the GPU than the gameplay camera.
Yeah,
so
that's the thing, right?
I agree. The transparency was pretty much the only thing which was lacking, I think, from this presentation overall, which is, to say, I think authenticity is extremely important when you're showing gameplay. And it's a question of, I don't really mind what platform you show, as long as you're fully disclosing what it is you're actually seeing. And I actually think Sony have gone above and beyond on that, because, they tell you when it's, they literally tell you this is not coming from a PlayStation 5 or, stuff like this, which is fair enough, right? But I don't mind if it is running on a high-end PC. To go back to your point about whether the ray tracing is mandatory, I suspect not, right? Because if they're already turning off RTGI for the gameplay, I suspect that the reflections will have a fallback as well for lower-end PCs, bearing in mind how important Game Pass is to PC now for Microsoft. And secondly, it will be a downgrade, but the image-based reflections aren't bad, right?
Yeah, they're not too bad.
Older Forza titles.
No, they're perfectly fine.
But obviously, we want the full experience, and I really want to see more of this game. I've got to see the Series S version.
This is such an interesting one. I do want to see that. There is something about the lighting in the daytime though that still has this. I always describe it as Forza lighting. Like there's something, I think it's not to do with the technology and more the way the artists have designed the game. Like when they showed us, there's shots with like the during the fall, presumably with the leaves, the yellow leaves and everything. it still has this look that's just, it's not going for that photorealism. You know what I mean, Alex? It's just,
I'm curious if the sun's color temperature or the color correction is
yeah,
kind of a little bit what you're describing, because I think a lot of it's like I think the footage looked really great, but sometimes during the daytime it did look a little yellow.
yeah, it's very yellow.
But
Exactly.
I don't know if that is the trackside stuff or if it's the GI. It's probably not the GI, but
No,
it's,
it's
you know,
probably
just
not
like there's just certain things that you come to expect in real life. And I guess we'll see when the game comes out. It's a little bit, I'm a little bit reticent to judge too much here, because once again, it's not like they showed like an entire gameplay track. It was still a little bit sizzle reel here where we saw
Yeah.
like one snippet, one snippet, one snippet.
But like, if you look at the shot there, I just shared with you on Slack, you can kind of see that what I'm talking about. Like, it's the look that they've had since Forza
I see
1
it.
on the original Xbox. Obviously, dramatically more detailed. Like, it's really, really superb amount of detail. But they seem to really gravitate towards this look, which I find is weird. And I feel like Forza Horizon does not really have that kind of look. So I think it's just an artistic thing that they really like, and they're just going for it. But I don't know.
see
The game has got full dynamic time of day here, so
There's no technical reason why they couldn't go for a more photorealistic look, but it has this like almost hyper realistic look, you might describe it, where it's a little bit like, I don't know, it's just something about the look of it. But I'll be curious to see more. But it's interesting. But
there was some amazing stuff in that trailer though, and in the footage. You know, the damage stuff.
Damage is great. The trackside
the
detail
accumulation.
is huge. Like, it's so detailed compared to pretty much any track-based racer we've seen to date.
If you were taking a shot every time they said "from the ground up," then you would be in a bit of a state by the end of that presentation. But you know, I think it's fine to actually highlight that this is fully developed with the new generation in mind, right? And that is the defining point that's actually probably going to be of crucial importance when you do your GT7 versus Forza Motorsport comparison.
It's going to happen.
You've got, because what we've got there is cross-generation at its zenith almost with GT7, and here it's a brand new project from the ground up. So it's going to be really interesting. It's different goalposts almost, but it's not as if GT7 doesn't look spectacular.
I think it would also be interesting to bring Forza 7 back into the mix, because, if they've redesigned these tracks from the ground up, then it feels like it would be a great way to... You could actually see some of the evolution there between that game and this game, because being a title based on real circuits, naturally, you're going to have a lot of locations that are shared between all these games, right? I'm sure the ring's going to be in there again, so we can do another comparison with that. That's always a good one, because it's really foliage heavy and showcases how the different engines handle trees and terrain and all that.
Yeah,
but
they also were talking about 20 different environments and 500 cars, which I think is quite important, because when we look at the prior generational leap, there was a bit of a content surfeit. The opposite of that, a content reduction as we move from one generation to the next. And we've seen that also with Gran Turismo in the past. So it did look as though they wanted to reinforce the fact that, hey, we've spent the time here, we've crossed every, we've crossed every bridge, we've done everything we've needed to do to make this a fully featured game and a generational leap.
That's a good point, Rich, because I remember Forza Motorsport 5, when that launched on Xbox One, it was pretty limited in terms of what it offered. And then GT Sport initially, which was the only PS4 Gran Turismo, well, obviously GT7's on there, but it's the only PS4 exclusive one. That game itself was scaled way back from what Gran Turismo used to be, specifically, I think, so they could actually build something and release it in a timely fashion, and then they've just built on that. So I think that's kind of the trick with these games, that you really have to make something that you can iterate on, but still implement new stuff. Like that one, that Mercedes in the trailer, that seems to be a model that's shared all the way back to Forza Motorsport 4. But then a lot of the newer cars look completely remodeled. So I'll actually be curious to compare the different car models as well and see, because that's another thing you see with these games is the quality of each car is not always universal, right? Because they're made at different stages during development. Sometimes they're pulled over from other projects, that kind of stuff. And that's just a limitation on manpower, I think. rather than anything technical, right?
Yeah, it's just, could you really spend all that time modeling 500 cars? I don't know.
With the amount of detail in the cars today, it's just too much.
I don't think so. One thing I did actually notice in the trailer, this is totally small, but they actually improved their motion blur quite a bit.
Yeah, that looked a lot better.
So like if you pause the frame, like there's one part in the trailer where like a white car is flying really close to the camera. If you pause it there, then you'll see that like in the previous versions of the game, the motion blur like had like a hard cutoff line when it would stop.
Yeah.
And here it's like a transition. It's like a dithered transition, and it looks better in motion, in my opinion. So I still want to see more gameplay of this game in the end, like a full track, and see what it looks like when you start a race. Do it to the end without any camera panning stuff that makes it look really fancy, just like a normal race. That's the last thing I probably want to see from this game before release.
Also, did you guys spot the crowds? In some of those scenes they showed, the crowds are very dense and really nicely animated.
Oh,
I'll be curious to look at them up close, because that always produces some fun meme-worthy shots, right?
Like the
crowd man,
like the stencil people in Forza Motorsport 5, or was it?
There was that, and then in GT7 you had some rather interesting looking crowd.
Wow.
The last thing I want to say about this presentation actually isn't even about the game. It's about the camera they used to film all the development shots.
The 60 FPS one?
No. It's whatever lens camera they're using. The shots are so beautifully sharp, and they've got this gorgeous depth of field in the background behind the people they're filming, and I'm just like, man, I wish I could film shots that good. I just don't have the awesome lighting or camera quality to pull it off, but it looks amazing. So,
yeah, there's a lot to discuss about the the direction of this particular presentation and the production values,
big time,
and the content, because I think they just hit it out of the park. It was just pretty awesome. But for now, let's stick with the games. And we didn't get a release date for Forza Motorsport.
Just 2023.
Just 2023, which is in stark contrast to the next title we're going to discuss, which is Hi-Fi Rush, which is out now, which is and was what I believe was it Alex the Youth?
Yes,
would call a surprise drop.
Shadow drop.
Shadow drop.
The Youth.
John, thoughts on Hi-Fi Rush? Have you played it yet?
Yeah, I sampled it a little bit this morning. It's very, very slick and quite a beautiful game. They're doing some stuff with the visuals that I've kind of wanted to see for a while now in a 3D game. Not in every shot, but it's like the Arc System Works Guilty Gear Xrd style animation, right? Where they sort of keyframe out certain animations with a specific perspective in mind, and then they don't interpolate between them. So you actually get that look that it's a cartoon. Like
so variable frame rate almost.
Yeah. And now during gameplay, it's full frame rate, which probably makes sense because it looks smoother that way. There was that one, I can't remember the name. There's some deserty game, an indie title last year. I'm forgetting.
It's not the Car Rally, is it?
No. I forget the name, but they did that thing where it was like a low frame rate for the character movement, and it felt really bad. It was terrible. Mm-hmm. Where this is like full frame rate movement and gameplay, but during cutscenes and stuff, they do that sort of like low rate update, which looks like super cool. Beautiful, really slick, almost. It does really feel like something that you might have seen during the Dreamcast era, or even the Sega on Xbox era, you know. Mm-hmm. It just it's got a great vibe to it.
We do know that there are certain key individuals within Microsoft that really love Jet Set Radio.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this does not play like Jet Set Radio at all, but it definitely has some of those aesthetics, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really. This was an awesome way to reveal a new game. It's not something I expected from Tango. Just dropping it like this, the shadow drop, it's really smart in terms of getting people talking and just getting interest. I think you can do that with slightly smaller games, especially if they're good. If you shadow drop a game with problems, it's not going to go well, and you shouldn't do it for really big titles either, I think.
What was the name of that one game from like Babylon, whatever? What is it called?
Babylon's Fall?
Yeah, they should have shadow dropped that. That would have really got the buzz.
They should have shadow dropped that in the garbage can.
I was going to say, just dropped it.
Just drop it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that, because, the basic concepts that there was no hype whatsoever, because nobody knew it existed effectively until, there were leaks a couple of days before, I think.
Technically, this is another thing I just want to mention. There was actually, it was leaked a long time ago in the Jensen's prophecy, by the way. It's one of the games on the list under a different name. It's called like Hibiki on the name, the list of games, like it's internal development.
How do you know it's the same one then?
Oh, because I think it's like when you check the Steam Depot, you can see like the original like uploads of it now.
Really? Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Jensen
interesting.
strikes again.
Jensen strikes again.
Wow. Any thoughts on this one yourself, Alex?
This is a title I would like to see Microsoft do more of in,
Yes.
like at the time period when they're struggling to put out games last year, and it feels like Forza, Halo, Gears, like this like tripartite cycle that just goes off every couple of years. It's really cool to see both the console and PC title. It's because it's released on both. That just does something completely different, and it's smaller. It's, there should just be more smaller AA titles like this coming from Microsoft that are like stylish and cool. Like that's the stuff I like
agree.
to play, actually. So,
And it reminded me of years ago at one of the E3s. I think Microsoft had like the greatest characters in gaming, and they had like that panel with 5 characters, and it was Master Chief, Gears Man, Lara Croft, the Forza car, and then some guy from a canceled game. And it's like with this kind of stuff, it's like they're finally getting this in action and starting to put out some more
Forza
interesting.
car.
Yeah, the Forza car there, I love that.
Did it have eyes and a mouth like Pixar's cars?
Oh man, if they did cell shaded Forza with cars like
why not do it?
I bet they'd find success with the kids.
Yeah.
Well, look, all I've got to say about this is that when Microsoft acquires a studio and the concept of commercial necessities changes somewhat owing to Game Pass, the idea that we get games like this is kind of like the best case scenario, right? And it's kind of like the things that we want to see from these kind of massive corporate acquisitions. The ability for developers to actually, exercise their creative muscles, not to, just become farming AAA experiences. But the point is that it looks awesome, right? Mm-hmm. AAA or not, it looked incredible in that presentation. And is it Unreal? I mean, that's Tango's engine of choice these days.
I think it's DX12 Unreal.
Yeah, I think so.
At least on PC, console, whatever.
I mean, I guess whatever they were using before is long gone from the Evil Within days.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing that was great, adding to the unexpected nature of it and the fact that they played off it, right? From the creators of the Evil Within, in brackets, seriously. That just added to it.
Did you notice how they did not mention Ghostwire Tokyo? I wonder if there's still some kind of rights thing going on where
because it was OG PS5,
right? Well, where they can't mention it yet.
Possibly. I mean, assuming it's a year timed exclusive similar to Deathloop, we should expect to see something in March time, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think you're
That'd
right.
Be interesting.
Yeah, but obviously that is a really good looking title, and I think Oliver's champing at the bit to take a look at that one. So we should have some coverage on it next week. Let's move on to the next title, which I suspect may well have been your favourite out of the whole lot, John. Redfall. So there's been some confusion as to what the game's about on pretty much every presentation we've had up until now, starting with the CG trailer, which told us nothing. But this was essentially a deep dive into, an overview of what the game is about, with lots of detail, and I'm liking what I'm seeing.
This has been a strange one, right? I think Arcane, they've released some of my favorite games in the past few years. Pretty much everything they do is a banger, as you might say.
As the youth say. Alex would know.
Yeah, so you're right. The initial reveal of Redfall was kind of a big question mark. They did the typical CG trailer thing, and it really didn't say much. And I was worried that it was going to be a Left 4 Dead style game. Not to knock Left 4 Dead, but I don't really like those types of games all that much, to be honest.
It's not what you associate with an Arcane experience.
No, and it's not
right?
what I wanted from them at all. But that does not seem to be what this is. It does have co-op, but it still seems to be very much a events-driven, play as you want kind of pseudo-immersive sim-ish game in many ways. It's almost like Arcane's take on Far Cry 2, it seems, to some degree. It's got a little bit of that going on. I'm really curious to see how the whole thing ends up playing out, but it definitely looks extremely interesting to me. We'll have to see where it goes. Visually, it looks pretty good, I'd say. It is supposedly Unreal Engine 5 now, which
it's not really evidence in the trailer at all.
No, that'll make this one of the first big Unreal Engine 5 games, right? Besides like Fortnite.
Yeah.
To actually ship on consoles, because I don't think there's been any others.
I can't think of any.
I can't think of any.
Isn't Stalker 2 due?
It's supposed to be, but we'll see, obviously. That's one where we give them a wide berth. Yeah.
The one visual problem I feel like I saw was I don't like the way the flashlight cone works. Did you notice that, Alex?
It's like right in front of the camera, and like
it does,
you barely see the parallax from the shadows.
Yeah, so this is the thing with when you have first-person flashlights, and this does cast shadows, you kind of need to slightly offset it in just enough way to actually see the projected shadows, and without it, it just looks a little bit weird. And this just kind of has that big center circle right in the middle of the screen, and I kind of hope they tweak that a little bit to make it look more visually appealing. But other than that, it still has sort of a stylized look. They have those lanky looking characters that remind me of Dishonored, where they're like not really realistic. The proportions are a little bit off. It's slightly cartoony, but still somewhat realistic looking. And the whole game kind of has that appearance, I'd say. I don't know. I mean, what did you guys think of all that?
It didn't seem like a super hyper detailed world, because I think they focused on like the scale a bit more. Like I noticed like multiple times where they're like in an indoor area, they like look at some object and I'm like, it's got like that like Unreal 4-ish like Sea of Thieves level of like, I don't know how to say it. Like it didn't look super hyper detailed, but it was more about like the overall picture, and that's fine for a game. They don't need to be, cranking out like super crazy Callisto Protocol level of detail on every object or something like that. No, that's not necessary. I'm excited that this is not a Left 4 Dead style game, and it has a more open-ended. You can play it single player. I hope one thing that these games that Far Cry 2 and Far Cry 3 included, since we just played Far Cry 3, I was just thinking about how one thing I don't like about these faction maps things that often happens is like random events and or respawning enemies that they can somewhat take away the sense that you are making progress of unlocking certain parts of the world. If you think about like that Resistance, what was it, Homefront Resistance game, or was it Homefront? The second Homefront. Was it called that? The Revolution? I don't know what it was called.
The Revolution, maybe.
Maybe the second Homefront game, the one by Dambusters. That one had similar problems at times where you could see like the random spawning enemies, and they would like not like you wouldn't ever get the sense that you're making progress in the world. And that's one thing I hope they somehow mitigate with their system of like mini bosses and clearing out the world of this infestation of vampires. So it doesn't feel like, I don't like that moment in Far Cry when you just like all of a sudden in the distance you turn around and there was guys that spawned there that weren't there before, and you're like, you just see through the cracks in the game.
Yeah, Far Cry 2 was notorious for this. People talk about that game with like this sort of love, and I think it's good in a lot of ways, but it does have pretty serious issues with that. It has zero persistence, basically. So it means all of your actions feel meaningless, and I hope that they get that right for this one. That's really important. One thing I will say that they definitely got right, and this is super important for these games, the silenced pistol. The way, the angle of the model, the way the character holds the pistol when they're aiming down sights, the animation of it, that needs to feel good in this type of game, right? Because you're going to have that silenced pistol out a lot. At least I do. The way it looks to you while you're playing in first person and the way it moves and animates is so important to me. And I think it just makes the game feel good when that's done well. And all the weapons here do seem to be handled quite well. which is so I'm hoping the actual core game feel will be excellent.
The one thing that I was only a little bit worried about, and this has nothing to do probably with anything that's actually in the real game. This is just me nitpicking. But one thing I dislike about modern games is how every weapon needs to have like some sort of like red dot sight attached to it.
Yeah.
Like every assault rifle, every shotgun, every sniper rifle here looked like some sort of weird military fetish thing. Instead of like, like your I was imagining when I saw this game, I thought they would have like some sort of like Evil Dead style weaponry, like a double-barreled shotgun and some sort of weird arcane stuff, But a lot of the weapons here do seem like stuff you would find in like some sort of sporting goods store in the United States. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm not talking to you, Alex.
This is true. Yeah, definitely don't want that.
A couple of notes just to add to what you said. There did seem to be some pixel crawl issues and aliasing issues, which surprised me because that kind of style of artwork really benefits from being super clean. In terms of the gameplay seemed to be interspersed with these scene setting shots, like drone shots, which I thought looked awesome, and really showed you the scale of the world. And I'm kind of wondering if they're there just to set the scene or whether they're actually going to be part of the game. I hope they're part of the game. I don't know. Depends on how well they integrate. But yeah, it's all going to come down to how the game plays. And I think they did a really interesting presentation that actually set out the stall of what this is all about for the first time, which really made me much more excited about the game. So yeah, I think that's going to be very exciting. Not too long to wait there. I think it was May for this one.
May 2nd, I think.
Yeah. Let's quickly talk about the rest of the content of this developer underscore direct.
Gesundheit. Want to do that again?
Add that in there, Oliver.
No, let's leave it for the lulz. Yeah, first of all, Elder Scrolls Online, which we've never covered, and we might have actually maybe covered it right at the very, very beginning. I can't remember, but I certainly didn't cover. I've never played it. I think they did a really good introduction for the game that those that haven't played it, although some of the stuff looks CG.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they really did sort of lay out, set out the stall for what this game offers, the sheer length and breadth of content in it. And they also got in there that they've got an Xbox Series X, Series S enhanced version as well with various performance modes, which is a nice bonus to have. So maybe we should be taking a look at that one because it looked really interesting.
At the very least, it should win awards for being the game featured at the most shows. This
game just never stops. Like, wow.
I think when Bethesda did their B3 or BE3 stuff, this game has been in every single one of those shows. So it never misses, and here it is again.
Do you have anything to add about it, Alex?
This was one where they've been plucking away at it on PC for a long time. They added in things like, I think it was the first title to have DLAA as an express option in it, which is always really cool. And I'm a little bit ashamed that I never took a look at it. And maybe the actual impetus for that now can be showing like Series X versus PC and seeing like how well do MMOs translate in general to... Because, MMOs typically are a PC genre, just because the amount of hotkeys and crap you have to do in those games. So it would be interesting to look at it also from that perspective. How well does the gameplay translate over?
How does it handle hotkeys and crap?
Yeah, how does it handle hotkeys, quote unquote, and crap?
Well, you've just written the YouTube headline. I mean, I spend ages writing these things, but that one's done. I can tick that off.
That could be the thumbnail. How does it handle crap? Yeah. But other than that, I think the last title that is one that I don't know if we'd ever. I think this. I don't know. Maybe Tom or Oliver could maybe look at this one when it does come out. Is Minecraft Legends? No offense. I don't want to give you those games that I'm not interested in. But
are you not interested in it, Alex? Because it seems to have RTS elements to it.
It is RTS elements, but there's certain things of RTS that there's different genres of RTS that I like, and this doesn't necessarily really appeal to me.
Is it
much.
Because it's a crap-free experience?
is a
You're not
crap-free
interested?
experience.
It's not
no.
Warhammer. That's the problem. If this
It's not
was
Warhammer,
Warhammer, you'd be into this, right?
Yeah, or Command and Conquer, or any of the craft games, StarCraft, Warcraft. I like that stuff. No, but that's a joke. But
This is a craft game, though.
this is a Minecraft game. I guess, yeah, maybe it is partially the world. Maybe it's just
StarCraft, Minecraft.
This is probably the universe this takes place in. Doesn't interest me so much, but it seems to show off like it requires teamwork and things like that, strategy stuff. Once again, very curious about how this translates to consoles because the interface issues and such. But
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk more generally about what they did here, because every E3 we all just complain about the what we've previously called the trailerification of video game presentation, which is a barrage of meaningless, almost meaningless video clips with, maybe at best a kind of trailer man style voiceover. And we kind of had enough of it, and we sort of laid out our stall for what we would want in a presentation, which was essentially to let the developers tell the story of their game and to actually use authentic gameplay. No CG nonsense, just the games, right? Just let the games speak for themselves and let the developers present them. And not only did they do this, I mean, maybe they're taking notes, but, I consider this to be an obvious thing, right? But the production value that went into it, the production values were just off the scale. This was incredible stuff, right? I mean, bespoke graphics for introduction and an actual coherent visual style throughout the presentation across all of the studios. As you pointed out, John, the camera work was quite amazing, although I think maybe some of them were on the green screens.
Maybe.
I don't think in Forza it was. But
I think
Redfall was, right?
Yeah.
Redfall, I think, was, yeah. But even so, it was a proper show, right?
Yeah.
And it actually said to me, it sent out the message to me that we really value our developers, their games, and what they've got to say about them. And I thought it was a triumph.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, it allowed each game to sort of get its own time in the sun, so to speak, and give you a better look at how the game plays in a way that more resembles some of the older demonstrations of games from a different era before we went to the CGification of things. And it makes a difference. It definitely, I think, excited people. It just gives a lot more context, and it was the perfect timing too, because Xbox fans are hungry in 2023. But this also bodes really well for, I assume, a standalone Starfield presentation. I could see them doing this format for Starfield and like giving it, I don't know, like 30 minutes, like let Todd Howard go nuts and just showcase the game, showcase the studio. Kind of like, you remember his Fallout 4 presentation? That was so smartly done.
Or the Oblivion presentation.
Yeah. That stuff is awesome. And I'm curious to see what they'll do with this sort of increased production value for that game coming out soon enough, hopefully. And anything else they have lined up for this year. This also raises the possibility of other games potentially appearing as shadow drops. They're trying to push Game Pass. So it's much more well suited to that sort of thing now.
Yeah. Isn't Ninja Theory working on 2 games right now? And one of them we've barely seen. Because there's obviously the next one is the next Senua game, but they've also showed off like this kind of interior environments in Unreal Engine that kind of looked like their studio almost, if you recall. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's another Shadow Drop game.
Is that like Project Mara or something?
Something like that. It's got a weird name. I recall it vaguely off the top of my head right now, but something smaller. Maybe that's what they could do with it. I echo all your points. The only one I would say is that I would like more clarity on the platforms and
transparency.
Technically, I don't think it needs to be as slick looking. I think if they just sat a dude on a couch and he played a level of a game, commenting it with like 2 other people, I also wouldn't mind that as well. To be honest,
different kind of content, right? You can do that as a follow up, right? I think the concept of actually delivering a fully fleshed out show is quite important. If we go back to the Jeffs at the end of last year, everybody was bemoaning the fact that Microsoft didn't. Well, they did. They physically turned up, but there was actually no representation of Microsoft games within this pristine prestige event. And I actually think now we've got this show, everything is put into context, and I don't think they needed to be there. Why should they be there? Why should they share the limelight when you can put out a show like this, which is entirely focused on some great-looking games?
They probably saved money too. A 7-minute spot in the Jeffs would be, woof, that's a lot of money. Although Christopher Judge got his, what was it, 10-minute spot?
Multi-million spot.
I think the point remains, if you've got this show in development and it's got all of this content in it, do you need to share the limelight with other people? And the answer is, I don't think so. I think they made the right call in retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there was an announcement or two they could have done, and if they want to put out some CG trailers, well, that's the best venue to dump them in, right? Because you never know what you're actually seeing at the Jeff. So but ultimately, this show was fantastic, I thought.
And this is not a completely new format for them. It reminds me of at the conference where they revealed Forza Horizon 4. That presentation was actually kind of similar to this. Where they walk
within E3, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was a lengthy segment.
That was the highlight.
That was the highlight. I remember even sitting in the auditorium when the different seasons hit. They actually filled the room with things like falling leaves and like snowflakes, kind of stuff. Like it was a 4D experience, like the Muppets 4D theater. Or Captain EO, if anybody remembers that. But it was really cool. And they basically applied that formula to all these games here. And I think this is a really nice balance between sizzle trailer and like full-on deep dive. It kind of meets that in the middle, where it's exciting enough that I think a lot of people can tune in, because not everybody has the patience for just sitting down with the developer and watching them talk for 30 minutes while playing the game, right? But this isn't just like a CG trailer either. So this is the model I hope Microsoft adopts going forward.
Yeah, well, I think they will. I think they know they're onto a winner here. This show is fantastic, and well, I'd like to see more. But let's move on to other news topics. And where should we begin? I guess we should talk about Forspoken. Forspoken. Which, there was a distinct lack of review code going out before the embargo, and obviously this set a lot of low expectations for people. We did get code. John, you were on it.
Yeah.
And but we didn't receive the PC version until, we were literally waiting for the Steam unlock. So it's kind of like a story of two halves there. Where do we want to start with Forspoken, John?
Well,
there's quite a lot to talk about here.
I'd say maybe from the first moment we got our hands on it, because I remember playing it for the first time and being somewhat confused and confounded by what was on display.
You've seen the demo before, though, right?
I played the demo, and there was this sense like, yeah, this looks okay enough, but hopefully other areas look better. And the problem is, the demo area was probably the best looking area in the game, and which was unexpected.
It really is. Yeah.
And that's kind of the issue. Like the initial section in New York City, aside from it being extremely ham-fisted and kind of bizarre, the actual rendering quality there is not super impressive, I'd say. And the thing is, though, is the actual level of detail is fine. It's just, as I said in that video, the lighting is terrible. And the way they lean on their ambient occlusion, the AMD cacao, but more like caca if you ask me. But it's just like an old style outline shader that you walk into like an alley and you get this boxy looking alley and it's just like black lines around the corners and nothing else is properly. It's like everything is like shaded using like a white cube map or something.
It looks so awful.
And I'm so like, weird. What are they doing? Because when you look at their actual GDC presentation, they're not doing anything cutting edge there, but like the way their probe system works and the way they were ray tracing environments and then baking that out into a cube map and then sampling that cube map. So they say, And we saw a lot of the stuff work pretty well in Final Fantasy 15, I'd say. But here, it's almost like they changed something and it all broke. You know, like that's the confusion I had going on. Like, what's happening here? Like the lighting doesn't seem to work correctly. Like almost like it was not lit correctly at all. And it's even worse because it's a static time of day in this game. When you go back to the city, it does change occasionally, but it's not actually changing in real time, right? It's just a different bake. So this conceivably should have had significantly better lighting than Final Fantasy 15, because that was a dynamic time of day, and it already looked phenomenal for the time.
And don't forget, John, this is a PS5 only game and PC
PS5
only. Like
game.
they could have baked out such detailed maps or just like a really dense program.
Yeah, like
super. There's so many things they could have done, but it just doesn't seem like it's in there.
No, it's like it's literally not there, and that's what baffles me because, like I said, I actually think if you look at the geometric detail in any scene, the quality of the modeling is perfectly fine and good enough, I think. And if it was lit correctly, it would probably look pretty darn amazing. So there's that. And then it's not just that. It's also like some of the artistic choices. They go really heavy on the bloom. They use all these like weird, overly bright fog effects. Like some of the fog stuff's cool, but then others, when you're out in the terrain, it's just like they washed out. There's this
too high of an ambient color on that fog.
Too high of an ambient color, weird garish sky color choices, and then overly contrasty visual design where you'll have things in shadow look almost pitch black, and then everything else is like overexposed, and it just winds up looking garish and unpleasant to the eye. And on top of that, I started testing performance, and it's like, wait, the quality mode is dropping to like the actual lowest I found after the video even is 18 frames per second. Like 18 frames per second in a PS5 only game.
Using DRS.
Using DRS. Looking the way it does.
What?
So you just look at a project like this and think, what the heck happened? Something went wrong. And you look at headlines a year ago where they're like, we're going to make the best looking open world game ever. And I've been playing Witcher 3 during this. Witcher 3 is a game from 2014 or 2015. It's 2015. And yes, it's been updated with some new features recently, but it's like, wow, Witcher 3 actually looks a lot better. And so that disappointed me. And then there's this PC version, right?
Yeah,
we got to talk about the PC version.
You've tested. We've all tested it, right?
It's bizarre.
It's got like it has like, if you look at it, I say this in the video. I'm not done with my video at all yet, but I'm getting through it. But like you look at like the basic options and you look at the feature set and you're like, wow, this is going to be an amazing PC version, and it kind of isn't. It's like good, but also pretty bad in some aspects, and it's baffling. It's once again just like baffling decisions where you're like, did an alien make these decisions? Like some of the, because like, for example, on the PlayStation 5 version, FSR2 in general, and also other games with FSR2 have supported this before, where the baseline resolution scales and then FSR2 upscales that up to the output resolution. It's used in Deathloop. It's used in some other games I can't think of right now, but it's used on console pretty often, and they use it here. On PC, they have a dynamic resolution option that is a checkbox, and you can check it with no matter what your settings are. You can always just check it for some reason. But it doesn't actually work. It only works if you use native resolution rendering with the game's TAA. And it doesn't say that anywhere in the options.
No,
it does. There's nothing that says anything about that.
So in theory, logic would suggest that if you select DLSS or FSR2 or XESS, which we should get onto, then the dynamic resolution box should grey out, suggesting that it's not going to work. But it doesn't. You can still select on and off, which kind of suggests that it does work with those options.
Yeah.
But, I said to you this morning or yesterday, Alex, I don't think it's doing anything with DLSS.
No, it definitely isn't.
And it's not.
I've double checked this morning. It only works with the native res, and it doesn't seem to scale that far down too. It's got to be like maybe 80 or 75% axis scale. So it's weird.
That menu thing also applies to something I'm sure you'll talk about, but like the ambient occlusion, the PC version adds supposedly, well, it does, but RTAO. but then it has a separate SSAO option, and you can turn that off, and it just gets rid of all AO, even if you have the separate RTAO enabled, which is actually how I would prefer to do it, right? Just disable any screen space solution and use the ray traced ambient occlusion. You can't do that. You have to have SSAO on as well. But the
quality of that RTAO, this is all going to be in my video, so just, I don't want to, well, I'll say it all right now, but to a certain degree. The RTAO in the game must be broken. Or maybe it only applies in certain cutscenes. I'm testing this out. I'm going to be testing this out today still. The thing is, I would just be doing a normal video, but unfortunately when things don't work in the menu, I'm left guessing and having to figure out how things work so I'm accurate in my video, and it means it takes more time, and it's really annoying from my perspective. But currently, you just turned it on. It kind of affects performance because there's a BV8 structure being rendered in the background apparently, but the visuals look pretty much the exact same. Maybe it's like a tiny bit darker, but it has all of the visual aspects of screen space screen space ambient occlusion. So if like a character gets in front of an object, it'll literally, as I say, the RTAO disappears. And it's like, what's the point of this option? So this is going to be one of those weird titles where I think my recommendations are going to have to do nothing to do with the console version, because the console version already looks kind of bad anyway, and it doesn't perform very well. And I think it's also going to be ignoring the ray tracing options that the game has, even for high-end PCs, because it may not be worth the performance drop. What?
That must hurt.
Yeah. Just because it's not good. I don't even talk about, I'll mention in the video, but like the ray trace shadows, they apply to barely anything.
Is it the same as the console ones where they cut off and just revert to shadow maps?
They cut off really close to the camera, and you can see it. And also, it doesn't apply to things like, well, it doesn't apply to foliage, including trees. It doesn't apply to character hair. And I've seen multiple shots already where it doesn't seem to also apply to characters.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was trying to get shots of this to show it, and it's like, wait, sometimes you just don't get shadows at all, or the shadows that it does cause are broken looking. I'm confused by that.
I'll show some stuff in the video about this, but it's just not worth the extra performance for like the occasional area where you would slightly see a better appearance of the game. And I can't obviously play the entire game in its entirety through and do all the testing I want to do, so maybe it also breaks things. I've read things online where people are saying turning on RT shadows breaks some visuals in some scenes, and I'm like, well, that's great. And I've also found already that you can't even compare to the console version, because the RT shadows on console look different than the ones on PC. Like I'm already finding things that are just baffling decisions.
They use screen space shadows for the grass, I noticed.
But they're not very good.
It's extremely noisy, and screen space shadows can actually look pretty good in grass. I think Days Gone did a great job with that.
Really good job with that.
But it's just like black noise that kind of filters over the grass. It's really ugly.
And another thing I'm finding, like, I love the extra attention to detail here to include FSR, DLSS, and XESS. DLSS and cool. XESS were not announced at all. At all beforehand.
We didn't believe it was going to happen, but it did.
And it did. Yeah. But there's some obvious oversight there where I don't think they actually did a lot of visual testing with the game with either one on, because XeSS has some like serious aliasing issue with depth of field, and DLSS mostly better than FSR2, but there's an odd issue with specularity that occurs on certain surfaces that I'll show in the video. It's just it's got all the pieces and parts there in the menu and from its description to be just like 100% better than that console version, but it just makes some it stumbles in a way that is just sad, because these are things that they should get right. Why not get it right?
I would say though, Alex, having finished the game on PS5 and then playing the demo, the gameplay benefits a ton from the PC, in that this game actually plays super well with the mouse and keyboard. If you delve deeper into the combat and actually get into the systems, I think you would see then how much of a benefit this really is. It just feels natural targeting with the mouse and running around. It's very smooth. The controls are great on that front, and playing at, if you have a high-end PC, you can do it, but I'm playing at 3840 by 1600, 120 frames per second smooth. It loads super quick. Everything feels snappy. So even though it's not great looking, it does feel significantly better to play than it did on PS5. So
yeah, but you are using a 4090.
Yeah. At one point,
I booted it up with a 2080 simply because it's broadly equivalent to a console in terms of raster.
Yeah.
And I was curious to see what you could get from it. And I'd say that the game doesn't actually give the user any kind of visibility as to what the settings do and what the potential impact is on your hardware. And the most blatant example of that is the textures.
yeah.
Where, there's nothing in the game telling you, hey, you've only got 8 gigs of VRAM here. Don't be selecting anything higher than the standard setting. You need to get that. You need to get that guidance from the Steam forums, not the game. And so, if you do set the textures to high or very high, then basically they just don't load, a lot of them. So, you mentioned in your PlayStation 5 video, I think it was like a.
One of the cutscenes that happened.
One of the cutscenes had low resolution textures, and this is kind of the same situation writ large across like most of the textures in the game. If I try to use the high texture setting or the very high texture setting,
but Rich, did you try inserting the second disc into your PC and then installing the high res textures?
Yeah, you missed that. But that was also on the Steam forum.
But bearing in mind the high system requirements, I mean, this goes back to your video, Alex, which is about disclosure, properly showing the user what the settings do. And, I also think, of course, the concept of, not burying essential information on the Steam forums is probably something to learn from.
Yeah, it's like the quality could be there, but it's just like baffling designed.
It's not there.
It's just not there as a result. And it's a shame because I think it could have actually, like with a little bit more transparency in those menus and some working options that work in a way that you imagine they would, then it would have been like the best way to play the game. And currently I'd say if you have like a high-end PC, it is really awesome in terms of just like fluidity, but it's like mid-range PCs, this is a really huge question mark game at the moment.
Yeah. The thing is there's no guidance from the game to say, hey, hold on a minute, you're on a pretty low spec system.
This is the first game with DirectStorage support though, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm wondering because I actually did. So when I first loaded up the game, I did have some mild stutters, and Alex was like, "Oh, I got no stutters," which is what people usually say. So I'm like, "Yeah," but I thought, all right, let me try moving the installation from a SATA SSD that's kind of slow to one of my NVMe drives, and sure enough, the loading was faster. No stutters at all. I mean, the loading is insane. Like, it was fast on PS5, but like even on here, it's literally just like the screen goes out and comes back up. Like, there's basically zero loading. It's so fast.
It's basically instantaneous. Yeah.
But it does seem like the speed of your drive has an actual noticeable impact on things, which is fascinating.
I'm going to be doing a test for that at some point.
Cool.
Probably tomorrow morning. Because there's all the things we've been talking about. I'm like, man, I got to make sure I get some footage of that.
There was a story I saw online about the 4090 losing 10% of performance using DirectStorage. That sounded a bit odd to me.
I don't know about that. I don't know how. There's some things I could test, like deleting the DLL for DirectStorage and see if what it does to the game. There's a number of tests I'm going to be running. One I've already looked at is checking out how much actually throughput is this game using. And it's actually not as much as you think, even though it is a DirectStorage title. The first one, it's like just about as reasonable as Spider-Man, actually.
Okay.
So it's nothing too out of the ordinary in terms of how it's using the disk. But that was just one test. Maybe I have to do some more. So we'll be seeing this video. We'll see how it is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's crack on and move on to the next topic. It's kind of like a continuation of our travails in reviewing.
No.
Dead Space. John, we received code for this a few days before embargo, so we're not going to be there on embargo. In fact, the embargo is long since gone by the time people watch this. It hasn't been a smooth reviewing process again.
Yeah, that's
Some
fair
of
to
the
say.
issues which we had have been fixed for the day one patch. We had gold master code, I think, for the reviewing
Yeah.
process, and some of them haven't been. I guess we should probably sort of keep the conversation quite small here and let the content talk once it eventually arrives. But there are a couple of major issues here, right?
Yeah, so before I will say on the positive side, I think the remake is extremely well done from a game design perspective, and I think all the visual updates and the new assets are quite nice looking. The game plays very smooth. It plays better than the original. The FOV is wider. The changes they made to the level design make a big difference. That new director system they've implemented also changes things up, and they've done a good job here. The game is not in question, and most of the tech is also quite good. There's just one problem. They are using this really weird combination, and I've primarily looked at PS5 since we got first. There's this weird combination of dynamic resolution scaling, which is then upscaled with using FSR2, then combined with a software variable rate shading solution. And that right there is, so I've actually spoke with the developers yesterday about this and learned a lot of cool stuff about what they're doing with the game. And I asked them about this, and they were slightly confused by what I was showing, and they are looking into it. So there is some potential hope on the horizon here. But basically what you end up with is this VRS solution causes anything that's within like X percentage of shadow to reduce the shading rate by either 2 to 1 or like 4 to 1 grid. It's like a 4x1 grid kind of thing. So like 1 pixel becomes like 4 pixels on each axis at worst case scenario. It looks like, unless it's just, it seems to scale with the resolution. But the point is that it creates this really noisy, muddy image that reminded me of Wolfenstein on the Switch, where like the pixels are like the size of your fist. All the shadow detail is just turned into this like noisy, smeary mess, and it's baffling because
I did see some of your choice clips, John. I was kind of concerned.
It's shocking, right? Like it doesn't look the way it should, and I really hope this is just an error on their part and something that will be corrected quickly, because it's a bad solution in this case, and it sucks because everything else these guys did is really good. Like the game looks awesome in motion, and it's the new assets are fantastic. Like they did a ton of good work, and then it feels like this software VRS solution just came in and sliced their tires. You know what I mean?
Jeez.
Like it's this one decision that they made, and I'd be curious to know how much performance saving they're actually getting. It just ruins the visuals.
Yeah,
and it
so
sucks. It
that's
sucks.
it's one really interesting thing where if they do fix this, it's going to have a performance implication of some sort. But
sure.
the game's already running well enough, based upon what you said to me.
Yeah,
so
that's
far.
the other thing right now. So like, by the performance mode's pretty much a locked 60. A couple tiny dips here and there, but it's mostly just perfect 60, very smooth. Prior to day one, they have an issue where the frame rate is uncapped in all modes. So in quality mode, it's supposed to be capped at 30, but the initial version is not capped. So it just kind of runs between anywhere from like 35 up to 60 FPS. And on PS5 especially, where VRR at 60 hertz can only cover down to 48 frames per second, that means it's extremely juddery. But they are actually patching in the FPS cap that should be there.
Should be on day one, right?
That's
to be clear.
That's what they said. They were waiting on some final I guess needed to be vetted by Microsoft still, and they were waiting on that, but they kind of pushed it forward. So hopefully by the time you hear this video, that part is fixed, because quality mode does improve the overall image quality somewhat, and it also introduces ray traced ambient occlusion, which actually, it's good RTAO, like it's similar to Battlefield 2042, but it's even better in this case, so it really fits the type of environment they're doing, right? Like it looks awesome. So that's actually a nice addition. So yeah, it's just one of these weird mixed bag situations, but it's only mixed because of that one feature. And they also revealed that they changed to FSR2 at some point. They were previously using the Frostbite checkerboarding, and then now they're using FSR2. And I feel like this combination of FSR2 upscaling from a lower res, but then also coupling that with the VRS is kind of the culprit here. And it's just causing problems with the image quality.
So it's on the Frostbite engine then?
Yeah, it is Frostbite.
The Frostbite checkerboard's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very good, actually. Yeah,
I loved the Frostbite checkerboard. It's really, really great. So I think FSR2 in this case looks worse. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe the problem is just the VRS. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean the 30F. I mean in terms of our review woes, obviously if we want to do a cross-platform comparison, we've got to wait for that day one code, specifically for Series S, which doesn't have a performance mode, which means that the 30 FPS cap not being there is not
disastrous,
great, quote unquote.
Well, it doesn't have a performance or a quality mode. It just has one mode, and that it does not have ray tracing on Series S. And I actually asked them about that, and as we've heard from pretty much every other developer, it's down to memory, the size of the structures that they contain within the BVH, especially in the larger sections of the map. It just pushed the memory too high, and it wasn't feasible. So no ray tracing on Series S, even though it probably could handle it visually, at least. It just doesn't have the memory to do it. So
what a shame.
Okay, fair enough.
One last thing to mention here is that we do not have the PC version as of yet.
It should be coming in any moment. Or
should be coming in, but I'm also in the midst of Forspoken.
Yeah,
so that'll be the immediate thing that I transition to thereafter. And I'm hoping that it's an easy video.
They told me that they spent a lot of time on shader optimization and compilation steps. So I'm hoping that it'll be very smooth for you on that front. It said there's an initial shader compilation step when you first boot the game, and well,
hopefully that's it.
Let's hope that there's zero stutter here.
Okay, good stuff. So yeah, both the Forspoken and the Dead Space content should be up imminently. But let's see. Hopefully. I mean, we've got to take our time on this one to get it right. But let's move on to supporter Q&A. This is the part of the show where, of course, our supporters on Patreon submit questions every week, and we choose the best / the ones we're best equipped to answer at this given point. And let's begin. We're going to start off with this question from Lil Gohan. This one is for Rich. Will you be covering the RTX 4050 upon launch? In the past, the market at large has gravitated to the $250 to $350 GPU, 970, 1060, 2060, 3060. And with the way this generation is tending, it could easily leave the 4050 at 350 to 400, a far cry from the budget segment it's meant to represent. Just to quickly answer that, yes, we will, of course, cover those GPUs, and I think NVIDIA's got something to prove here. They did have an MSRP of $250 on the 3050, but the 3050 should have had the same performance as the 2060, and it didn't. It fell short there. It had the memory that the 2060 didn't have, but it didn't have all of the performance. And for me, that was a bit of a disappointment, bearing in mind how crucial this market sector is, as Lil Gohan says. So I struggle to believe that the 4050 would be a $400 product, to be honest. I think part of the reason why we're kind of pessimistic about this particular market segment, it's not just the higher end cards, it's also the fact that the 3060 had a pretty reasonable MSRP. It's supposed to be $330, but you couldn't actually buy one for $330, which obviously is a problem. But, you know, even today, I think $330 is a pretty good deal for the 3060. You know, you get all of the DLSS features, you get, well, apart from DLSS 3, obviously, you get pretty decent ray tracing performance combined with DLSS. You know, you can run Marvel Spider-Man and get an experience equivalent to the PlayStation 5 version, if not better. I do think this is crucial, though, because, you know, we were talking last week about the meltdown, about minimum specifications, and I've been thinking about that, and I'm wondering if the meltdown isn't so much about minimum specifications rising, but rather the fact that this $250 to $350 GPU segment isn't being as well serviced as it was in the past. So it's not so much about specs rising as opposed to upgrade vectors becoming more limited. So yeah, I mean, we will be looking at the 4050. I am hoping for, good performance. I mean, the ideal would be like 2070, 3060 performance with at least 8 gigs. But, that 3060 with the 12 gigs, it's a pretty good deal if you can find one at the $300 mark. So yeah, Nvidia once again could end up having itself as its own competition there. I don't know. Right, next question. This one from Tamer Iskander. Hello, DF Squad. With the lightning speed rise of generative AI in the past year, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, etc., do you foresee a future where DLSS can have an auto-remaster feature to automatically upgrade game graphics in real time? Maybe let you choose from different art rendering styles. I'm interested in hearing thoughts from all of you, including purists like John, who value the authenticity of each individual pixel. I'll get to you in a minute, John, but Alex, we were speaking to Tom Peterson from Intel, and did he not position AI as doing exactly this, a possible use case?
That he did. It was one of the ones he talked about applying essentially style filters to the game. Which totally doable from a 2D perspective. Sure. But the only thing that is like applying it to like a 3D perspective, where the due to the output image being fed into the GPU, the AI can get a sense of the 3D world and then manipulate it. That's a little bit harder without screen space issues.
Okay.
So I would say yes for a certain part of it, but I still think we're a long way off from like the applicability part. Like, does someone want to play a game where it's like stylized maybe like a painting of old, like some sort of impressionistic thing? I could imagine playing Dark Souls like that, for example. But like for other games and other features, I don't know. The utility is a little bit low for me, so I'm not so interested in it. But I can see it definitely being doable. Yeah.
There's also a time taken to process those images, right?
Yeah.
And also the concept of them being temporally consistent from one frame to the next.
They usually aren't. These AI things, they're not.
Mm-hmm. So that's problematic. But I'm curious about this question, John. Are you a purist who values the authenticity of every individual pixel?
Pixel racist.
I would say I am a purist. I like my pixels.
You like DLSS though.
I do like DLSS though, and it doesn't really interfere too much with those original pixels, and it makes them look nice. But that's a different thing than like taking something that's like all the AI art stuff. I think it's a lot of very impressive stuff, but it all has this look to it that feels off to me. Like there's this super smooth weirdness to all the edges that I find like kind of uncomfortable to look at.
I get what you mean.
One technical director I spoke to about AI just basically said it works 99% of the time, but the 1% really sticks out, which basically ruled it out for him. And that kind of makes sense based on the things we've seen, even the chat GPT stuff that's emerging, which seems to be extremely compelling. But, you actually did some AI DF analysis this week.
I did, yeah.
In the style of Alex Battaglia, which I thought was quite amusing.
The only issue with it is it didn't replicate my spelling errors, so it definitely wasn't.
The main issue with it was that it said that you could use higher power PC hardware to solve the problem.
That's right.
I just said to John straight, that's not Alex.
That's not me. I would never say that.
I asked him. I mean, I know it cuts off at 2021, but I did ask him to review Forspoken for me. And the result was like, it reads, the latest game Forspoken, developed by Square Enix External Studios, is a stunning visual adventure game that pushes the boundary of what is possible on current-gen consoles. Digital Foundry has taken a closer look at the technical aspects of the game, and it's clear a lot of effort has gone into making it one of the most visually impressive games on the market. And then it goes on to talk about how it's Unreal Engine 5. It uses nanite virtualized geometry. It runs smoothly on both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X at a steady 60 FPS. And it adds ray tracing, which adds realism to the lighting and reflections. So I'm like,
like the exact opposite.
It all reads like something that's totally like makes sense, but if you actually look at what it's saying and consider the details, it's 100% wrong on everything. So
Well, I've heard AI in terms of imagery being used described as hallucination, and that is definitely a hallucination of the DF article.
it truly is. Yep.
I'm going to move on from the concept of John as a pixel racist.
Oh yeah, you're adopting the Tommy Tallarico school of thought now, like gaming racist.
He's a gaming racist.
It's not my words. It's the words of Alex Battaglia.
I might have whispered it to the mic.
Alex knows what the kids like, and he knows about gaming racists.
Wow. Okay, let's move on to the final question. Although there's one that I might want to pick up on from earlier. This one from Frosty Grey Bob.
Ooh,
At the risk of discussing the Switch's near obsolescence to death, would anyone on the DF crew, in brackets probably Alex,
Maybe.
no room for pixel racists with this question. Would anyone on the DF crew, probably Alex, be interested in quantifying just what kind of leap we could see in performance from the Switch's current X1 SoC to the rumoured T234, T239 SoC, also known as Orin? It could conceivably be done, right, Alex?
I'd say that's very conceivable.
With a great degree of latitude.
Yeah. I just think, look at the market competitor in the Steam Deck, and that's on a fine process. It's on a good process. It's not the latest one, because I think only the PlayStation 5 is using that currently. But I think you have to look at that and then scale it down just a tiny bit in certain angles and buff it up in others. And that's what you kind of get in terms of like the jump and what we should be expecting with the next Switch. And then just maybe being more feature rich. So I can't give you a good quantification there, because I think Nintendo just always surprises me in how, like, sometimes like with the Tegra SoC, they also used clocks that were not the clock specifications that we were used to seeing with Tegra, so it was lower end in those aspects. And I can't give you a good answer here, so I'm going to shuffle this off to Rich really quickly.
Well, I have got a PC GPU that is essentially the Switch GPU. It's a really low end Quadro, which has got 256 Maxwell CUDA cores. So obviously the whole profile of that card is different because the memory bandwidth is much wider. But in theory, you could use that and do some comparisons, or you could use the Switch itself. I think that something which Alex pointed out is that the Switch SoC kind of vastly exceeded expectations when we actually saw the Switch games, because prior to that, all we'd seen had been the Shield Android TV, where the games were awful, pretty much. There was a good port of Doom 3, but that was about it. But essentially having an API that was, low level and addressing that hardware produced some fantastic results. That's something you can't really do with these projections. But with that said, the RTX 3050 on the laptop side has got 2048 CUDA cores. I am curious as to what would happen with that chip if you downclocked it to a mobile sort of level that would be broadly equivalent to what we could expect with Switch. So I do think there's maybe, some interesting tests that could be done there. How viable is DLSS when you basically throttle this chip down to almost nothing? There's some interesting experiments that could be done there, but in terms of quantifying generational leaps, it's, you're going to need to factor in a huge degree of latitude, because, what developers have got out of the 2015 Tegra X1 has exceeded my expectations by a long chalk. The concept of that doing, The Witcher, id Tech games, even at 30, right? When I first saw Tegra X1, it couldn't do a multiplayer level from Crysis without an extremely low resolution and a really dire frame rate. And yet you look at Crysis 3 remastered on the Switch and it's not bad at all, right? So, doable, but temper expectations.
Maybe they'll introduce a new DLSS level just for that, called exceedingly excessive ultra performance or something, where it's like it
Excessive
renders from like 320 by 240 up to 8K.
Yeah, it would need to. Well, I think I think the point. Alex has looked at this in the past, and the point with DLSS is its compute time is defined by the output resolution.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's adds further to it. I honestly think that the output resolution would probably be 1080p rather than 4K, or maybe 1440, or maybe up to the developer, depending on how many how much resource they've got available.
Man, they can't release another console that only supports 1080p output though. In terms of from the machine.
What do you mean another console? The
Wii U?
Switch barely supported it.
I mean, Switch and the Wii U support 1080p output.
1080p output, but not 1080p gaming. Right?
Never.
Well, but just having
exceptions.
4K output is nice in terms of for upscaling purposes. Even if your rendering res is much
For
lower.
upscaling purposes, it's pretty good.
I am going to sneak in this question that I forgot to sneak in.
Before you sneak that in, Rich, there's breaking news.
Oh gosh.
I just got it's breaking for me anyway. I just got a press release email. Alex, do you remember a game called Terminal Velocity?
Yes, I do.
It's getting the boosted edition. It's coming in March. The original developers from Terminal Reality apparently are remastering this bad boy, and it's releasing on PC and consoles. Widescreen, enhanced graphics. But it seems like they're preserving the pixelated look, which is awesome. I don't know. I just saw this and I'm like, usually these things come in. I'm like, yep, another game. Like, wait a minute, Terminal Velocity, the Terminal Velocity. It is. It's coming back.
I mean, that's definitely a thing
awesome.
Someone could do. Yeah, do it.
That's good.
I'll play
yes, there's that. All right, Rich, back to you.
Yeah, this question should have gone in the Forspoken commentary, but it didn't because I wasn't looking at the sheet. The question is from Taggart86. Now, when we have the first game supporting DirectStorage, when do you think it will be the norm among PC devs? Alex, any thoughts on this?
It's going to take a little bit because, for one, I don't think Forspoken currently, based upon my testing, is actually using DirectX 1.1's features. That it's not using them. It's maybe using the API, but it's not using them. For example, I don't think it is using GPU decompression based upon the things I've looked at so far. And I think you need like a growing pains period with every API, where there's going to be some developers that test out the waters in it. Maybe not all drivers are ready for it just now. And I think it's going to be about a year or so until we start seeing it pop up more regularly. I think we're going to see at least one or two more DirectStorage titles this year. And one or two of them may surprise us. But I think that's really about it for a while now, because based upon what I'm seeing here, I mean, it's definitely helping in some sense of the word, but it's hard to get a grasp of it because I keep reading commentary online for people who definitely don't support DirectStorage. Like they're playing from Windows 10 and like a SATA SSD, where it would basically get almost like not too much, and they're still loading the game in seconds. So I think a lot of Forspoken's love here and why it's loading so quickly is not down to DirectStorage necessarily, and their presentations show this even, but it's more just down to how they arted the game and how they essentially got rid of the CPU bottlenecks that occur during normal loading. So so I'd say we have to wait a little bit for it to become more normalized.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say I had a quick go on the Steam Deck and its loading's dog slow. So obviously you'd expect that.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, just opening the map is bad. Where it just it takes like 15 seconds to open the map, and then another 15 seconds to get back to gameplay.
So I'm curious about that. We saw back when Spider-Man launched, if you recall, Rich, there were some issues pre-launch with the GTX 1060 and RX 580. And also Steam Deck at that time was kind of disastrous until they changed up some stuff. I'm curious if this title also is evidencing certain things, because I've been noticing when I turn the camera on a mid-range part, I'm also seeing frame time drops that I usually don't expect to see in a normal game. Usually when you turn the camera in a game, unless you're looking at some drastically different looking area, the performance is pretty normalized. But in this game, I'm noticing that when you turn the camera, performance automatically kind of dips pretty heavily, and then when you stop moving, it goes up again. It's a little bit weird. I'm curious if we're seeing similar I don't know how to describe it. Like with Spider-Man, it was like they were loading stuff really just outside of the frustum, like incredibly close to it.
Right.
We'll see.
Okay, well, that's it. That's the end of the show.
Rich, I don't know,
John's
though.
got something to say.
Is
there more breaking news?
There's no more breaking news, but I'm looking at the list and I realize we haven't had a question from Adabata Pling Boink Wee or Chili Con Carne in some weeks.
Or
There was one from Agonizing Rectal Pain, however.
about 2 weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah.
That was more recent, yes. Well, hopefully we'll see them again soon.
Hopefully I see you back, chili con carne.
Yeah, the hacker aliases were just too normal, too vanilla this week. We'll hope to do better next week. But that is it. That is the end of the show. Please do like, subscribe, share if you did enjoy it. Ring the bell for those notionally instant notifications, no guarantees there. I'm off to talk to Alex about pixel racism.
We're gonna just...
And we'll see you all next week.